Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Wednesday Album Club. I am Marty. I'm one of your hosts. I hope you've all been doing well. Feels like I haven't been around these parts much this month, but coming back at you. One guy that has been here more than me this month is this guy right here, Kellen. Thanks for filling in all the gaps for me, and good to see you. How you doing?
It's all good. Yeah, I'm doing really well. Had a great time last Friday with Rick and Alan.
Still haven't watched it. I'm behind on everything.
Well, it's all good. Yeah, had a great time talking about doom metal, and was happy to see Alan posted a follow up to the question, "Who are the great big four of doom metal?" that he put on his channel this week. So it's been a lot of that, and in terms of what I've been listening to, like every heavy metallurgy episode that I ever get a chance to participate in on a Friday, there's usually about 20 different things strewn around my floor that I pull out, and I will spend once in the lead up, and then I should spend more time with that record. So they're still present on my floor, and but they've been what I've been listening to. So I grabbed a couple of things that I did not get a chance to talk about. It's one of those conversations where we could have gone on a little bit longer, but I was really pleased with how the conversation turned out, despite the bands that were missed on my part. So I have frequently talked about sort of my affection towards all things Chilean metal, but another country for me that I absolutely love is Poland. And just like Procession and Capilla Ardiente are sort of shared members with two very prominent doom bands from Chile. This is Monasterium and Evangelist. So Evangelist is here, and they also, here's a Monasterium. These come out more recently in the past couple of years. Shared members, both Polish epic doom bands. They actually, I believe, Monasterium or Evangelist, I'm sorry. Evangelist has a split with Capilla Ardiente where they cover Mayhem's Freezing Moon on it. So anyway, two bands to shout out there. One genre that we really stayed away from the conversation was sludge. And fans of my conversations with Corinne will recognize this is Meth Drinker. So just very bleak stuff coming out of New Zealand, but this is true sludge.
Not Kentucky.
Not Kentucky, despite what the name may let you make you think of. But nonetheless, if you like some really nasty, sort of bleak, sad sludge, that's a good one for you. They just have two full lengths, and they've turned into a new band called Unruly. So you can follow them. And this record, Conference of Birds, by Ohm. I mean, the 2000s for me were very much marked by bands experimenting with drone and post-metal, whatever you want to call it. But when Sleep disbands, we get the formation of High on Fire, and then this project also sort of pops up. And Conference of the Birds, I had listened to this in a long time, but for bands in this style who are doing that kind of drone and doom stuff, this is a record that should not go. If you're a fan of that kind of stuff, definitely check out this contribution by Ohm, Conference of Birds. So that's what I've been listening to this past week.
Right on. Okay. Logan, welcome. How are you?
Hey, guys, doing great. The eve before All Hallows Eve. Cheers, everybody. Have a great Halloween. I guess what I've been spinning last Friday was quite the album release day. A shit ton of stuff came out this past Friday, and I wanted to highlight two albums by bands that I've been a fan of over the years. The first one is the new, and this is not this album, but the new album from Shamash. I have no idea if I'm saying that right, but it's off of this trilogy of albums called the Maldor Chants. And this is the first one, simply titled Hermaphrodite, and I guess this is the titular character here. But the new one is called Old Ocean. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this band. Kind of fit the they can't really be classified by genres. Simply, very much a mixture of occult black metal, a little bit of death metal in there, and like atmospheric and progressive elements to be something entirely unique, kind of like the band we're about to talk about. But yeah, love this. This is like a 30-minute long, one song EP that really just builds throughout their whole catalog through its runtime. Definitely recommend it, and recommend the new album too, Old Ocean. And then if you're a fan of like this sludge Kellen was talking about earlier, this band Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean released a new full length just this past Tuesday, the 29th, called Sisyphean Cruelty. This is an EP that they released in 2023 called Consumed by the Vitriol of Life. So Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean in a nutshell is like, imagine Thou, except strip away any like post-rock or experimental or like more lighthearted influence, and just be heavier, be harsher, be more intense, be more nihilistic. That's Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean in a nutshell. Definitely recommend these guys.
Isn't that the name of a Thou song? Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean?
Yes. Off of their debut Tyrant, they have a song called Fucking Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean.
Yeah.
So very much they live to pay tribute to that band, but I think they're starting to take it in their own direction a little bit. And then a new Halloween edition for me. This is one of Macabre's later albums, Grim Scary Tales. This is a weird album, and I don't know if I like it. I just got it yesterday. It's kind of bizarre and like hokey and kind of childish, but I'm trying to listen to it like you would a Primus album, and it's going a little bit better for sure. But definitely an interesting addition. And then finally, I am doing a live stream ranking of this band, which is not necessarily metal, but I'm ranking the Van Halen albums Saturday. It's like a midday matinee stream at 5 p.m. Eastern. So I got a buddy who's actually coming in town, and him and I don't share a lot of music in common. He's more of a blues guy, but Van Halen is the one band that kind of crosses over a little bit. So that's the stream.
You know, this is going to sound insane, and I might be wrong, but I don't know if I've ever listened to a Van Halen album from start to finish. Any album. I've heard hits. I've heard half of an album. I've heard songs here and there. I have never heard. I know. I've probably heard the whole album, but I've never sat down. I don't own any Van Halen. It just, I don't know. Radio was always good enough for me, and MTV was good enough. You know what? I used to have 1984. I take that back. I had it on tape. I'm going to take that back. But still, I missed all the classics. I don't know how I did that. I probably shouldn't have admitted that out loud, but it's true.
It's all right. Tune in Saturday, Marty.
You should listen to Fair Warning all the way through. That Van Halen album is good front to back.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, I agree with Jim.
All right, Jim.
So for me, had a little deal on the brain. Listened to some Heaven and Hell, my brother's house, and so I went home and played Sacred Heart. This isn't my favorite Dio. I think this album's a little more uneven for me, but there's still some really great songs on here, like Rock and Roll Children, Fallen Angels, Hungry for Heaven. There's some great songs, but I definitely like Dream Evil better, and of course the classic first two. But it's still a solid record. And also some Morbid Visions. This got back on my radar. This is another thing I listened to at my brother's house. He's got an original Brazilian press of this from when it came out in 85. It was pretty awesome. That's some perfect conditions. So we listened to that. And that was fun. But yeah, this thing still holds up, man. This is really great stuff, man. And listening to some Endlichkeit. This is atmospheric black metal.
Good stuff.
These demos came out, I think, about 10 years ago, actually, and I've got the fourth one too somewhere around here. But the reason why I got back on my radar was I got a little Bandcamp notice saying, "Hey, Inlakite has released new music," and basically, what it is someone is going to put out all of his demos on vinyl, and so he put out like a little mix and everything. So, yeah, if you like stuff like Paysage Ever and like the album, stuff like that, just like really dense, but very moving kind of black metal like that, this is stuff for you. I'd highly recommend Inlakite. I think they're from Czechoslovakia or something. So, but yeah, that's what I've been jamming on.
Right on. For me, yeah. Breaking it up a little bit here, not too much, I guess, but I was looking for something the other day. I was digging through the closet in our. When you walk into our house, there's like a vestibule type thing with a closet, coat closet. I was digging through looking for something. There was a CD box, like a bigger box. I'm like, what is this? Opened it up, full of CDs. Stuff stuff that I thought I've lost, I've rebought. There's like 2 or 3 CDs there I rebought because I thought someone stole them or I lost them or I forgot to take them out of my old truck when I traded it in on my van, or they're all right there. I think my sister-in-law was here and stuck it in there because it was in her way. Anyway, this was in there, and this is my favorite by them, Monster Magnet, Spine of God. Love this album. This is one I've been driving around listening to loudly in the vehicle. Just a great. As far as stoner rock goes, this is like kind of the end boss for me. I don't know. I also like, Power Trip? Like that one a lot too. That one has all the hits on it, but this is just nasty. I mean, you all know what Monster Magnet is. I'm not, showing anything odd or rare here, but it's just really good. It feels like authentic stoner rock.
Never liked those dudes, man. They used to come to Atlanta all the time, and unfortunately, they were always opening for bands that I was there to see. I was like, man, I just never got their shtick, man.
Yep.
What was that song? Space something, Mother. Oh my
Space
God.
Lord.
Yeah. I could go through the rest of my life and never hear that song again.
Well, Frosty, check out Spine of God. For me, I think it's a fun record. Another fun record. This Zoller sent this to me. Halford's Resurrection. I might have shown this a week or two ago. It's still in my rotation. Halford, he left. He did Fight. I don't know where this falls in the timeline. I think this is after Fight. I could be wrong. That's probably wrong. Between Fight and 2, I don't know. But yeah, this is surprisingly a really good, fun. Not surprisingly, I should say. He's trying to go back to Painkiller era of Judas Priest. First song on here is probably the best one. But they're all good, all catchy. It just sounds like more modern Judas Priest. This one was in that box. I must have bought the album. I bought this and then put it in the box or in my vehicle. Never got around to it. So this week has been the first I've listened to it. First Recordings by Pungent Stench. This is a compilation. It contains all of their split appearances, like with the Harmonic Orchestra, which is a classic. Compilation tracks, some demo songs, and a handful of live tracks tagged on here as well. It's a pretty extensive. It's a fun comp for sure. Classic. And my kid came up to me the other day. I've got I'm a Halloween fan, believe it or not. And I have the first Keepers of Jericho. Mr. Brain Smasher sent that to me. It's a tribute compilation album. My kid, we were listening to it the other day, and he's like, there's a second one of those. I'm like, oh, there is? So I hunted it down. Found it. Keepers of Jericho, Tribute to Halloween Part 2. Bunch of bands on here I have not heard. Iron Savior does Phantoms of Death, which Peter from Iron Savior was slated to be their first original singer in the band, but they're all high school buddies apparently, and he couldn't do it due to family obligations or something in the family. So he went on to start Iron Savior, which is a great band. But it's interesting to hear his take on a song he would have been on anyway. So that was cool. Paragon's on here, Power God, Steel Attack. I can't read that. Arwen, a bunch of bands I really have not heard. But a couple Darius songs, but mostly Kai and Michael Kiska era. Fun comp. That's that. That's what I've been mostly spinning. A bunch of other stuff too, but we'll keep it at that. And before we get started on today's discussion, stick around to the end. We are going to do a listener's choice episode coming up. We'll announce that at the end of this. But we are here to talk about From the Devil's Tomb by Canada's Weapon, now deceased Weapon, long deceased Weapon. Yeah. First impressions. We'll start with you, Kellen. What'd you think?
Yeah, so Canada listed as a Black Death band. I have sort of preconceived notions about what this band is going to sound like. And while their first record, I think, is probably closer to what you're thinking, this album is probably sees them depart from whatever your blasphemies of the world into something. There you go.
First album
There. That's a little bit more true to sort of form in terms of like Canadian Black Death stuff. This record, I think, sees them move into all sorts of different influences. There's a whole lot more songs here, and being a sort of a straight up war metal band, if that's what you were looking for, this record's going to sound different. For me, there's way more thrash on this record than I think the description may sort of lead you into. So anyway, we'll kind of get into the nuances of the songwriting here, but there's plenty of interesting sort of twists and turns I have going on this album. And yeah, it's for 21st century, whatever you want to call it in terms of genre designation, an interesting extreme metal listen.
All right, Logan.
Yeah, I was impressed upon first listen. I've owned their last album and their third one, Embers and Revelations, for a bit now. I guess I never fully dove into it, and thankfully, listening to this, I also listened to that one, and it's good. Upon first listen, it definitely cast aside any idea that this could be like a war metal or like even like a pulverizing, like blackened death metal album. This was fairly accessible to me upon first listen. I mean, like right from the get, I was noticing riffs, I was noticing songs, I was just really enjoying the listening experience upon the first go through. I think why that was is they were focusing on writing like a memorable occult extreme metal album versus like focusing on a specific genre tag or style. And the main focus outside of that is the riff writing. And I felt that because of that, most of the songs had some kind of hook that was immediate. There was energy, melody, and most importantly, a dark, like kind of cult-like atmosphere that lent itself to this time of year. So upon first listen, I was really impressed, and it kind of continued to unfold. So good stuff.
Yeah, for me too. This was, I think, my first album from this band. And I'm not a big war metal fan. I think it says one thing loudly over and over and over, and all the bands kind of do it, unless you're a band like Axis of Advance. That was always a war metalish kind of band that I thought did some different stuff and were pretty good. This here, the only thing on this album, like Kellen did say, the debut is a bit more in the war metal realm. It just is. This album, the only thing that really clings to that is the that drum beat. It's a blast beat style that sounds like a fill, like a roll, but it's not. It sounds kind of chaotic, and it can be a little sloppy at times. They pull that beat out a bit on this record, but the clarity of the production and the songwriting is just so much more advanced. It just doesn't. Vetis Monarch, his name is Mashrook. I've always known him as that, so I'm probably just going to say Mashrook from here on out. So anybody, when I say Mashrook, that's what I mean. He's a hell of a songwriter, and the fact that he didn't want to be confined by the parameters of war metal, he works a lot with melody, There's some songs later on in the album where, I mean, he's from Bangladesh, so there's a bit of a cultural influence on some of the scales, some instrumentation here and there. But to me, I have not listened to this album in ages. So when Jim pulled it out, I'm like, wow, I mean, it's only 2010, but Blast from the Past. It's been a lot of fun spinning this because it rips. It rips. First impression, wow, great songs, great and exciting songwriting. The songs don't always go where you think they're gonna, and they get there by sounding like they don't sound like everybody else. They have their own independent thought to them. But yeah, thumbs up. First impression, woohoo. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first time I heard Weapon was when we got the promo from Relapse when we were doing Worm Gear for Embers and Revelations, and I automatically loved it. And this was before it was released, and I went and and I think I went and got this one right after, and actually ended up liking this one even more. And I think it's because he lends into that South Asian musicality and instrumentation and stuff like that. It's on Embers and Revelations as well, but it's all over the map on From the Devil's Tomb, and I really liked that. It's not like they're the only band out there, especially since there's been a lot more that have incorporated a lot of sitar and stuff like that into their sounds and stuff like that. But I felt like with Weapon, it just didn't seem forced. Like it really feels like it melds with the music a lot more. And it just feels right, because it's always there, not just as like an intro or like a middle section or something like that, or an outro. It's incorporated within like the melody lines of the main riffs and of the verses and the chorus and stuff like that. Not to say there isn't just pure thrash, pure death, and pure black in different parts. There really are. It's but it all seems to work. It doesn't feel stitched together to me. It feels like, for lack of a better word, from the heart. And everything that I heard about Mash Rucker, Vetis Monarch, however you want to say it, because Marty knows him, he's interviewed him and stuff. He's a very genuine guy. And I think
I talked to him a lot behind the scenes too, like chats and stuff. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, and that's what I heard. I think even when Kim Kelly had interviewed him, she felt like this guy's the real deal. Like he wasn't just a great, fantastic musician. He really knew a lot about the occult. Like if you read his lyrics, like they're not your standard evil lyrics. Like you can see, like this guy does a lot of reading, and he incorporates South Asian mysticism in with the Satan and blasphemy. It's just very different. Everything about this band is different, though. You can definitely hear the influences, and that's what I like about it. It's like taking that old, taking your own experiences and your own upbringing, from Bangladesh and stuff, by way of Canada, and making your own sound. And yeah, man, I obviously I picked it. I love this record. I love the band. I love all three of their albums. Unlike Marty and Kellen, I do not hear war metal when I listen to Weapon. I know a lot of people say I just don't. I just don't hear it, man. And not even Draconian Paradigm. It's just not when I think war metal, I hear something totally different. Yeah, he's got that semi-aggressive blast beat, but I just don't think it doesn't. It just doesn't. I think of bands like Blasphemy or Archgoat, shirt I'm wearing tonight. You put those two bands, bands like this beside Weapon, absolutely nothing in common for me. But not a dig on war metal, because I'm wearing I love that stuff too. And it's just, I think Weapon is on another plane with their musicality, and with the experimentation and everything like that. But yeah, first impression was, these guys are shredders. They're original. They're great songwriters. And I think it carries throughout. You can definitely see a progression from Draconian Paradigm. But again, Embers and Revelations was like it was either number one or number two, my favorite album of 2012.
It's a great record. Yeah.
I absolutely love that record. and you know, a lot of single parts and everything. You know, this one I love it just a tiny bit more, just because there's a little bit more of that, you know, South Asian, you know, instrumentation. But really, they're both just right up there for me. So really excited to talk about this. You know, obviously, you know, Mashrock decided to dispel the band. You know, I already said he didn't feel like there was anywhere else to go with it, you know. But I think it's a shame, because, you know, I'd be curious what kind of music they'd be putting out now. But regardless, we're talking about a great record tonight, and if we inspire a few other people to listen to it, then that's what this show's all about. So,
right on. You got something for us?
oh yeah, question. So my question is, all right. Oh man, okay. Weapon has always been hard to define for me. Equal parts death, black, and thrash, with interwoven South Asian soundscapes and heavy doses of melody throughout. While our fearless leader Marty seems to think this is war metal, as we just discussed,
Not really.
most listeners, you know, tend to distill this down to two styles as Black Death. I believe primarily due to the lyrical content, tremolo picking, and Vetis Monarch's vocal delivery. Yet, that doesn't tell the whole story, as doing so completely excludes the melodic thrash component. What other bands do you view as having three distinct metal styles equally combined, or others just shorten it down, or other listeners just shorten it down to two genres or less? Marty, you go first.
Destroyer 666. Absu. Those are two bands that have death, black, thrash.
You took one off my list.
Yep. And in Destroyer 666, there's war metal contingent too. Violence is a Prince of This World is very, I mean, he came from Bestial Warlust, so there's a bit of that influence on their first album. But yeah, those three.
What would be the three genres you would call Destroyer? You know?
Destroyer?
Yeah.
Thrash, death, and black, I guess. But there's, yeah, I'm comfortable saying that. I think the thrash, it's just more of an old metal spirit. Maybe a little bit more heavy metal. Maybe I would take away the thrash and put more traditional heavy metal.
Especially on what's that, Wildfire? You know,
or even one. Phoenix Rising. You know, those albums. They have just a playful spirit, an anthemic spirit in their, at the core of the songwriting, and very melodically charged, very memorable. And, you know, that's what I hear a lot in Weapon. The melody lines on here are cool because they're atypical, and it's, the riffing is so good. It's very hooky. And then he does these little, and he has a similar vocal style as, you know, KK Warslut. And he's very anthemic, stately, the way he presents, especially in like the chanting nature of some of the choruses. I think it was the Furor something or other song.
Yeah, Furor Divinus. Yeah,
Divinus.
That has a great chorus. Yeah,
great chorus, and just the playful use of melody and not being afraid to use melody, and how much melody permeates from this album. The only thing I hear war metal is that, I guess you could call it like a Canadian hyperblast that was pioneered by Cataclysm. It's a very similar blast beat as that on the early Cataclysm records. So Canadian hyperblast, if you want to call it that instead of war metal, fine. Because war metal is just knuckle dragging, bloody nose type of music. And this is not that. This is a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Hey, what's up, TJ? So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where I'm at. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, I guess to kind of dive into the whole, like, if you're a band with a lot of different genres in there and you're kind of trying to be your own style, how do you fit in? I think if you are an unclassifiable band, you know, to the metal community as a whole, you kind of hurt your chances of generating more mass appeal. I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I always thought Weapon was very overlooked. Like, no one talks about these guys anymore outside of all of us, I guess. But outside of that, no one really mentions them. And I think that if you are fitting in multiple genres, like more than two, you make it a tougher product to sell in the media, you know? Like, when looking for bands to pull, because of your question, Jim, I found myself saying, "Man, this band should be bigger." A lot when I was thinking about options.
Well, the problem is they quit. I mean, because
Yeah,
the last album, they were getting a bit of a buzz. They were starting to play more shows, touring a bit. They were getting a buzz, and
They
Okay.
even had a couple of videos where,
Yeah.
I mean, like low budget Relapse videos, but they were still, cool. You know what I mean? I was expecting huge things for them after Embers, and they just kind of like, nah. I was like, what?
well, shoot, maybe I'm taking this answer in the wrong direction. I had not really heard of them besides just stumbling upon them in like the used bin, a couple years ago. But the bands that I picked, I feel like are underappreciated. And actually, one of them was from an earlier Metallurgy episode. Scythian, I think, definitely fits.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what are we talking here? We're talking like thrash metal is like kind of a backbone, then definitely that Hellenic black metal sound. And then there's some heavy metal like flourish and the kind of lyrical content and melodies that are on display here. Great album, often not talked about. And then I wanted to mention this band Suffering Hour too on Profound Lore. This is their last full length, The Cyclic Reckoning. So for these guys, definitely think like a mixture between death and black also. But then at the same time, there's a lot of psychedelic, like progressive leaning riff writing, and just the tone that they get on their guitars is just super unique and really does make me think of the riff writing from this album. So if you enjoy the music on here or on this album from the Devil's Tomb, definitely check out some Suffering Hour. This one, and then they have an EP called Dwell, which I think is perfect. And cheers, TJ.
All right, Kellen.
So when I first saw Jim post this and I started to think about records, they fell under two different ways to think about a band. And I think often if you are at the start of a genre, like if you're at the formation period, I think it's easy to fall into this kind of world, right? So I grab Open the Gates here because this walks the line for me of, you listen to some of the songs like Metal Strum, and you can feel like they're getting faster, they're getting heavier. It's a little bit more of an American power metal track. You get Astronomica,
Such a killer song.
Witch's Brew. It's like classic sort of Manila Road, but then you get to like the Ninth Wave, and it's very doomy. That song's this slow burn. It's like a 9-minute long track. So at this point in their catalog, they've got American power metal, they've got an epic heavy metal side, and they've got a doom side. And they blend all of them here on this record. But it's one example of when you're this early in the genre, I think it's easy for you to kind of stumble upon sort of different designation.
They later trip over thrash metal too a bit,
Yeah, that got heavier and faster as they went along. So here's one. I just got them on my episode with Rick and Alan. I didn't pull this band, but Come My Fanatics. So this is Electric Wizard, right? Here we get doom, stoner. And the thing about Electric Wizard for me is they always sounded like they listened a little bit to like Crust. Like there's something a little bit uglier about their records by comparison to the sort of cathedral world that they were inheriting. So they are the classic example of the band I will pull that sort of merges all of those different genres and finds a way to sort of reconcile them in a way that I felt, helpful. So I wanted to pull two other younger bands though for conversation. If there's going to be one that sort of operates in this extreme metal space tonight that I will want to promote, this is Witchrist from New Zealand, Beheaded Ouroboros from 2010. So Black Death and then Doom is the inclusion here. So I know people will probably think of like, I heard, Bestial Warless talked about earlier, and that's probably something we should talk about later when we get to songwriting is from Australia, New Zealand, that venture into South Asia. A lot of those bands sort of play in this style, like Impiety, Abhorror. bands that may get brought up later on. But that part of the world is very much into this world, this style. And With Christ from 2010, this is a record. I'll throw that out there. And another one, like, I never know what to call. I've heard this debated two different ways, but like Obsequiae. So some people call this mellow death, melodic black metal. There's so much investment in like acoustic sort of medieval work here, though. I feel they kind of marry a lot of different things in this very well realized sound and style. But I know people can kind of go back and forth in terms of the melodic death metal side of it versus the castle black metal stuff. But a band that also is very much interested in sort of medieval music altogether. So if we're going to talk about Weapon incorporating sort of a cultural inheritance based on geography and history and contributing it to a Black Death sound, I think Obsequiae in a very different context is a way that you're using very specific kind of, harp arrangements, et cetera, to include in this kind of stuff. So those are my choices there for you, Jim.
Mellow folk and black metal. Perfect. All right, Jim, what do you think?
Well, first of all, man, it's crazy, Logan, you pulled Suffering Hour, because I was just talking with Frosty in the chat about Pestifear, a band that was years and years ago, a long time ago, signed to Eihwaz. I put out their CD. And I think it was the bass player from Pestifear is the bassist and vocalist from Suffering Hour.
Oh.
And
no idea.
Guitar player Lucas is in another great band called Sunless, who are on Willowtip. So
Sunless are good too.
So yeah, you guys should check out both of those bands.
The Pestifear album rules. That might be that and that Tosca are my two favorites from that early.
Yeah,
era.
Absolutely. It's still one of my favorite things that I ever had a hand in releasing. I'll put the name of it in the chat because you guys should definitely check it out. Yeah, those guys rule. And also check out Lucas's band, Sunless. Marty, our great minds sing alike. I was absolutely thinking of Absu, the same, obviously they started out death metal, but it was, and then, heavy, occult, kind of like thrash after that. But I always saw them as black, death, and thrash. I heard all three genres really equally in Absu. You know what I mean? And especially in their mid to latter output. I kind of like always wanted to say all three because you got the very thrashy lifts, very risk, very technical. You've got the open chords played super fast like black metal. You've got the tremolo picking like death metal. The drums that kind of comprise all three genres. A band whose work I think really like it's a prophecy fulfillment of like the best of all three, in terms of their like musicality and songwriting. So yeah, that's a band, a lot of time you'll just see Black Death and and like Weapon, you hear Black Death, like it's like, missing out on that thrash component, and with Weapon's case, a melodic thrash component that I think is extremely important to their sound. It's a big part of what makes, for me, Weapon very catchy sounding. Another band that I feel is like kind of knocked down to just two genres, and they're more than that, is Typo. Typo Negative. Usually people just say like, oh, gothic metal, or it's like gothic and doom. But I think when I hear Typo, man, especially their early stuff, we'll discount October Rust here because that was just straight gothic doom metal. But their first all their stuff leading up to that, and definitely everything afterward as well, was like gothic metal, hardcore, and doom metal. These are the guys from Carnivore, man. And what were they called before they had to change their name? I think they were like called Repulsion before. Of course, I think they had to change them because the guys from Michigan. But yeah, they were always hardcore, and also in their approach and their humor and in their faster tempos. That whole riff that they always kind of defaulted to when they were playing fast. I always heard that. So it was always three genres to me, not just two, not just gothic, not just doom. I always heard hardcore as well. So yeah, Not a super deep question for me this week, but I was just kind of curious, what bands that always kind of stood out to you, like really kind of traverse three different realms, and instead of usually, we metalheads, we default to just one or two, and a lot of times I think it's just for brevity's sake alone, But so,
It was a good question, Jim, because it was also like consistent throughout their catalog. Right. Like, I think it would be really easy to say, oh, they blend, this style early on in their career and then they change to this style later on. But I think in your question was like, what is something that inherent throughout the entirety of their contribution in all their records you can hear? So.
Right. Yeah. That's right on for sure.
All right. Well, let's discuss the musicality and composition of From the Devil's Tomb. Kellen, let's go with you first. Good question, Jim.
So first, there's enough Tom G. Warrior grunts on this record.
Oh, I love it.
Oh my God. I was like, oh, there's one. And then they just kept on popping up. And I was like, okay.
And they're big ones too. They're like,
yeah. On this record to make any Celtic Frost fan happy. So, I think to me, this, I very much agree with sort of the Absu comparison in the sense that there's enough. If I were to sort of rank where their influences are, I'd say you're probably competing between black and thrash for the most part, and death is the third one that shows up to the party later on. It's primarily for me a heavy, or whatever you want to call it, a brutal blackened thrash record. But to Jim's point, it does not take long, one, to realize that there's a whole lot more in terms of song composition, right? For me, just to sort of put a fork in this war metal conversation, there's a whole lot more like proximity to grind, I think, that war metal has in terms of how songs play out. There's a certain simplicity to them. And like what Archgoat does well is they pummel you and then they just give you something slow, nasty to sort of sink your teeth into, right? Like that's the formula.
Nice groove, nasty groove.
Yeah. And like it's the same sort of success that I think a great grind record has, is like going to punish you and then we're going to give you a riff to remember and song, this is a whole lot more complex than that. So it does not take long for that to sort of make sense. And I just want to talk briefly about the melodic portion of this. I will somewhat push back on how audible or consistently audible sort of the South Asian element is here. Like, I don't think it's consistent on every single string on this record.
Yeah.
But it's enough to really rescue it from being sort of cliche as an extreme metal record, right? Like, it's prominent enough on a few of these tracks, really, that you're like, oh man, that's a huge influence going on here. And I just, as to think about this time period, there were more and more bands from like Sri Lanka and India who were also playing with those influences within this kind of war metalish space. So I'm very much, even though Weapons from Canada, I think they occupy the same space and time and history in my brain. Like, the distance between this band versus something like Genocide Shrines is another band that comes to mind during this era that deserves you mentioned. So the melodic guitar work here is a huge standout. There are lead guitar solos on this record in a way that is undeniable. So it really distances itself from anything that's just kind of blasphemy worship. But look at the song tracks, the track listing, I should say, that the length of the songs here, like 5, 6, we get an 8-minute long song. So they put a lot of thought in terms of shifting through different dynamics, playing slower. The first one that really stood out to me is the second track here, where we get like, it opens with sort of a slower kind of thrash moment. Then it slows down to something sort of thick and heavy, moody, and then it blasts into something very black metal, and then it sort of recycles the same process. So, 5 some minutes long, second track, it's already on the board. This is not going to be a traditional listen in that regard. But I'll kind of let the rest of the chat sort of chime in with their thoughts here in the songwriting. But overall, a very different kind of extreme metal listen if you only came to it looking for Revenge 2.0 or something like that.
Yeah. Logan.
Yeah, I guess to initially focus on the war metal theme that kind of seems to be going through this episode. I do think there is some influence on here, like just in the energy that some of these tracks possess. I mean, they're songwriting wise, I definitely agree with Kellen. War metal is that pulverizing grindcore approach, but there's certain sections here where like the energy is, I think, that of like a war metal track. Mainly, I think because of the drums. The drummer really has that kind of blasting intensity that, what do you call it, the Canadian blasting technique, Mark?
Hyperblast.
Hyperblast.
Canadian hyperblast. That's what the Cataclysm guys called it.
Mm-hmm.
Or Northern hyperblast, or whatever the hell they called it. I don't know. Hyperblast something or other. Yeah.
I think that energy is there, and just that like punk like kind of feel on some of like the more thrash oriented tracks that I also hear in, you know, certain war metal bands too. Other than that, yeah, they really do just do what they want. And I think the high point for me on this album is definitely the riffs. As I said, my first impression of this album was the riff writing. And on continual listening, it still was. Like, I just love how, what did you guys say his name was? But how he writes the riffs here.
Mashrook or Vetis Monarch.
So he has multiple names. So the riff writer guy, he does a great job. And honestly, the tone of his guitar is, I love it. It's unique.
Yeah.
I think it stands out and is what almost makes this album as special as it is. And yeah, that is definitely a unique guitar tone for a Black and Death band of, you know, whatever you want to classify this band as. So, and I think it lends itself to the influence that right here, Vetis Monarch brings, being from Bangladesh originally. So it also helps with the atmosphere that this band is creating, and the clean guitar riffs, and just it makes me think of some of these bands, Cult of Fire and Death Karma, if you guys have heard of them. Like, I think they're from the Czech Republic. But just where it's like a more pulverizing, like thrash or death metal approach, and then intertwining everything is just these beautiful like melodies and unique guitar leads that kind of sound out of place, but really they fit perfectly in the context of the album. So I like how that is kind of what segues track to track, is these guitar leads and melodies. And then finally, when it, you know, amps up to that thrash metal riffage, you're just diving head on, and it's great. I do agree with Kellen about the this is a personal record for Tom G. Warrior. Oh, you know, it's awesome. So let's see. Apart from the guitar blazing and riff savagery, the drums, I think, are immediately impressive. They do such a great job of complementing the guitar and the direction that the songwriting is going. I think it's interesting, and the kit is often used quite creatively with how they accent with, you know, the toms in certain sections, and then also the crash and ride cymbal as well. So it helps to, you know, make the album more energetic too. So, and that, as I said earlier, is where I feel the punk influence and the war metal influence seeping its way through. And it's one of those albums that, because of the amount of energy there, it feels like it goes quicker than, you know, it's about 50 minutes, but it feels like a quicker listen. And the songs, though are longer, feel shorter just because of the variety, I think, within the songwriting. So an engaging album all the way through, and one that was easy to return to.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, Logan's right. These songs are long, but there's so much variety in the riff styles, and they flow seamlessly into one another that it works. I love especially how Mashrick, like when he's doing a lot of tremolo picking, he's still staying within that sort of South Asian scale. I don't remember the name of the mode. I'm too old and crappy of a guitar remember. I don't know if it was Phrygian or something like that, but he stays in that scale run.
What did you call me?
Yeah, TJ probably knows. He's in the chat, but yeah, he when he returns to that, he's playing really really fast. I just love how he brings all that together, and then just out of nowhere, and he does it several times throughout the album, and most prominent on the opening and closing tracks. Everything breaks, and then there's just like a skull crushing thrash riff, and it just gets one guitar. You're like, oh, here it comes. I just love it, dude. There's moments like that, just harken back to my youth. It's like all this Black Death trimming, all this occult lyricism, great brutal vocals, and then just a good old school thrash headbanging riff thrown in there. I mean, it's for me, an old head like myself, it's perfection. This is like the kind of songwriting that I would love to do if I was in another band or something like that. I really love how he brings again these three genres that are very distinct, but pulls them together, and and the representation of each of those genres is at a very high level for me. So that's really hard to pull off, and not to sound forced or not to sound stitched together. For me, none of these songs sound like that. So I feel that Mashrick really cared about his songs, staying in the mind, and not just from a guitar standpoint. We've got the already mentioned Eihwaz. We've got them on From a Devil's Tomb and on Sardonyx. There's another great there, and it just letting headbanging stuff is coming in, pure metal awesomeness is coming in, and I love that preface to those great riffs. But he also has like really catchy like choruses too, and his vocal rhythms are very memorable. Like on Furor Divinis, he's like Shiva, that kind of stuff. And on Vortex 11724, carve thy flesh, carve thy flesh. It's you just
Vocal
I love
hooks.
that, and this song comes back around, and I'm just like, yeah, carve thy flesh. I mean, what's more metal than that? This he really understands what is great about extreme metal, but also gives it to you in such a way where you can participate in it. You can yell along from the diaphragm yourself with the things that he's saying. And that's everything that I want in an extreme metal listen, or just a metal listen. It's just there. The drums are solid. The bass tone is kind of like in different. Sometimes it's distorted. Most of the time, it's really clean, but you can always hear it. And he kind of has a serpentine attack behind the guitar riffs, which is. This is the band to do it in, because of that South Asian influence, to kind of like do, to not follow the guitars and kind of like do not Steve DiGiorgio type runs, but just runs where you're like playing in the key but you're not following the root note. Like it's just intriguing, and it just keeps on giving it, for multiple listens. So I feel like, the snare work of the drummer, the runs and the bass player, the riffs, the guitarist, and even the solos. I saw Tim in the chat bagging on the solos. I'm like, man, go back and listen to Left Hand Path Yoga. The solo and that instrumental is awesome, dude. It's like hard rock. It's got some wah in there. It's like, wah. I was like, wait a minute. We went from like South Asian Black Death thrash to like White Lion or something. I'm like, come on, man. I was digging it, dude. I'm like, give me the wah, baby. I love it. I mean, it was so unexpected, and every time I listen to that instrumental, I'm just like, yeah, just Oh man, I love it. It just puts a smile on my face every time. But again, it doesn't come across as hokey. It just sounds awesome. And how can you interject something like that? That's from a very very different genre. That's something he's putting a little bit of light in the darkness, but it isn't tongue in cheek. It just works. So yeah, musicality and composition. Vetis and crew nailed it for me on this record.
Me too. And the fact that each song, there's nothing that jumps out as out of place or wrong. So each song flows smoothly. The thing that they not only does Master mix up between just, fast blasting type riff lines, but he'll cut that away and go into more of a clean, weird little music sidestep, a break. And then they would recall on that stuff. It just shows how well the songwriting is, where you can go from a fast raging riff to something a little cleaner sounding, and then recall that cleaner riff played differently later on. I mentioned that in my notes in one of the songs, but I really think the melody here, every song has a hook, which is a great songwriting tool. They recall whether it's a vocal hook, in the chorus, like a chanted chorus, or the carve thy flesh, that is a hook. That's a vocal hook. That's something that pulls you into the song. You're like, oh, it's that song. It's the carve thy flesh song. And then you got sardonyx later on in the album, where it's got the, little ethnic instrumentation comes in, the hand drum and the sitar. And Kellen's right. They don't go overboard on it, but they do it once on that song and then recall it later. And it's just tasteful. It's just a sprinkle of a scale or a sound, and it works. It's just enough to further set the music apart from everyone else that was doing stuff in this realm. But the songwriting for me, the composition, it's really well considered. The use of melody is great. The vocal and musical hooks, they keep me trained in. I mean, this album's over 50 minutes long, and it doesn't feel like it to me. I'm like, oh, and they in the middle of the song, of the album, they put that the yoga song in the middle of it. It's an instrumental. It's really well done. The rhythm, the drums are very simple, but it's a very cool instrumental that has a lot of melody, a lot of feeling in it. And I just like the fact that they take me on a journey with each song, and the way they add to and take away the drums, there isn't just all blast beats. There's a lot of different interesting layers in the drum work, the giving and taking away of power, essentially. There's little things like that keep the song running down the road and keep me interested. I don't know where the song's going to end up, which is cool, but they keep me trained to those hooks. So I'm in for the journey. So yeah, to me, it's a very well-written album. They get even better at it on the next one. They really kind of lean into more hooks and more spacious compositions and stuff. So yeah, let's discuss the production. Logan.
Yeah, so this production is... Thank you, Kat. This production perfectly is centered around crafting an interesting guitar tone that really stands out and carries, I think, the album overall from start to finish. I mean, the clean guitar typically is what gets center stage, and it helps, bring the Middle Eastern, elements to the forefront. And I think the production is also exceptional because it allows all the other instruments to move effortlessly underneath this beautiful, clean guitar, and really carry the energy and the impact as well. The bass is the perfect example. Jim already kind of described the performance perfectly, but honestly, this is one of the best sounding bass productions that I've heard recently on the album club. I mean, you if you wanted to, you could listen to this whole album and just follow along with the bass work, and it would be a superb listen as well. There's a lot going on there that the production lets you be able to see. I do think the production does a good job of still feeling kind of occult sounding. It's not clean,
Yeah.
It lets you hear everything, but it's not clean. Rather than being a thick fog, like what you would get maybe from a war metal or something else, it's it's like a light mist. You know, you can hear everything, but it still sounds dark and a little obscure in comparison to like a well polished production. Like there's definitely an edge here. So I think this is like the ultimate trick and helps to accent what the clean guitar is doing, but still make this sound like an occult Black Death, whatever the hell you want to call it, album. And it just makes it perfect for this time of year. And really, anytime that you want to hear something a bit dirty, but that is also doing something kind of interesting. So I'm a big fan of the production here, and I think it helps all the performances on this album stand out.
All right, Kellen.
So for me, it's primarily a guitar and vocal record. The guitars sound huge. I mean, in terms of the amount of space that they occupy in the mix for me. And I agree with Logan's point that they have this fine line of it doesn't sound thin or high enough in the register to be a pure black metal listen. But it's unpolished enough or sort of it has a rough around the edges sort of sound where it kind of sounds a little bit closer to like an extreme metal listen, right? I don't want to what I do sort of potentially feel a little bit different is for the bass performance, I don't feel there's a lot of bass in the mix. So meaning the gap between the size of the guitars and where it sort of would roll into like the toms and bass drum, I feel that's a little bit lacking in terms of presence in the mix. And one of the reasons I know that is this is one of the records, for me, some of the drum production at times feels a little bit more on the modern side. Like I can't tell when they're in the like throes of battle, right? When that blast beat is going, but there's a few moments where I feel you get a deeper look in the mix in terms of how the kick drum is produced. And there's a little bit there of whatever 2010 creeping in terms of like a modern extreme drum metal sound. So, but to your point about being able, the vocal being audible, you can hear what he's saying. And his voice is forward enough to where you could hear it. So it's not concealed or recessed at all into the mix. So for me, it's very much a guitar and vocal record, first and foremost. And the production of the guitar specifically is a demonstration of how it sort of walks different lines that marry different subgenres.
Jim.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Kellen. That is actually something I wrote down. Is that the kicks in particular, they are like that kind of like modern kind of a triggered kind of a sound here. But on this album, like I think because it is like a very like rough around the edges overall production, that it works to cut through. So on this record, it doesn't bother me. I'm okay with it. The bass is there for me on this record. It isn't super loud though. I'll grant you that. And I think that part of it is because overall the guitar tone on this, to your point, it's not black metal, but it is a higher register for a Black Death album. It's it sounds to me like they're playing in standard. The most it could be is like D. I mean, they're not playing very low on this record.
Yeah.
And the distortion, like the gain is lower than a lot of bands of this ilk.
Yeah.
The gain is
not oversaturated.
It's not oversaturated at all. Like it has more of that almost like early Megadeth kind of guitar sound. Where it's more on the mid high range. Than the low end. It's not a scooped guitar sound EQ wise at all. But honestly, that's one of the things that makes Weapon original. The Embers and Revelations is the same way. It's a very frankly thrash kind of guitar sound, but played in an extreme metal kind of a way. So it's one of those things that an interesting choice that MASH makes. It's not going for like low and gloomy sounding or chuggy chug sound. It's also not going super high and you know, a shimmering sound like a black metal, you know, guitar tone as well. It's just really kind of sitting in its own little place. And I think that choice, you know, that sonic choice, if you will, kind of adds to, you know, the uniqueness of what Weapon is, and allows you to really understand, like, how, for me, how cool these riffs really are. You know, you can hear the picking, you can hear the choice of the scales. It doesn't get buried even underneath, like you were saying, you know, Kellen, the arsenal of the blast. Like, you know, you can always understand what the guitar is doing, and I think that has you know, a lot to do with the choice to not have an oversaturated sound, to pull back on the distortion a little bit, and to let the actual performance of the notes push through. A really cool and brave choice, because if you know, to stay extreme and to take this choice, I mean, you better really have good chops, you know, for it to like still be compelling. And it, for me, it completely is. You know, and another thing that they do production wise is there's a lot of panning on this album, where one guitar is doing one thing in one channel and another guitar is doing another in the other channel. And that's a simple choice. You know, it's not anything groundbreaking, but it's hard to do it and not sound like, you know, you're just making a mistake or trying to rip off Rain and Blood or something from the late 60s or early 70s. When they do it, I really like it because it's always like, it stands out to me. Okay, one guitar is playing open chords, you know, the other guitar playing is doing like a run up and down, you know, and they'll keep that consistent, you know, and then, or then one goes into the tremolo picking, and then the chords are, you know, like more like, you know, muted on the other side. And that's sort of, they don't do the panning all the time, but just in the few places it does, it really stands out. And again, it's a production choice that adds color to the songs, that adds another layer of depth. So they weren't just going in there and banging this out like a garage band. You know, they were, you know, within the confines of their budget and being on, you know, an underground label. I think they really made the most of it, but they didn't try to, you know, clean their sound up so much where, you know, you lost the sense that this was, you know, an underground, you know, Black Death band. I think that never leaves its focus here. And you again, you got to really understand your instrument. You got to really understand, you got to really have an intent in what you're trying to project, you know, as an album as a whole, you know, when you're in the studio. And I think that they achieved that. You know, this album sounds evil. Also, come on, man, this is one of the coolest covers, man. I love Benjamin Veerling's artwork, and I think this is the best thing he ever did. I really love this cover. So, I mean, from outside in, from inside out, you know, yeah, you know, it has a you know, you know, an intent, and it delivers on it.
I really have very little to add to all of that, because I listen to this album and there's nothing that takes me out of the trance. There's nothing that sounds off or wrong. I can hear everything. I can hear the bass. I can hear all the drums. They're right where they need to be. The vocals, the guitars sit where they need to sit in the mix. The guitar tone, like Jim stated, is not overdriven. It's not oversaturated with gain. There's enough to make it. You could tell these guys weren't using amp simulators. You know, it sounds like they went to a studio. And I also agree with Logan. It's still, even though you could hear like an occult vibe to it, there's a weird, they have their own sound injected into this, their own thing. And I have no complaints with the production on this. I think it's great for what this album is, for this style of music. It's perfect, really. Least favorite songs, Kellen.
So there's a lot of tracks that I enjoyed. So Vested and Insupulus and Violet Stole, that's track number 2. That for me is the example I hold up and say, look at all the different things this band is good at. Like there's 3 different talents on display in terms of songwriting for that track. I mentioned it earlier on how they go from like thrash to sort of this sort of slow open space sort of atmospheric thing to straight up black metal, and then kind of go through the paces again. It's a great, for me, like example of their talents in terms of songwriting style. The back end of the record, the two tracks that really stand out, Sardonyx for me, that's like a glimpse into that South Asian. Oh man, that comes in. Please, more of that. I actually wish we got a little bit more of that kind of style here, because I don't know if it's just I'm a sucker for it, or because there's a lot of great black thrash or extreme metal, warish, whatever you want to call this. Very few do that in an articulate way. And I think this band, when they're at their best, incorporate it. It doesn't sound overblown. It doesn't sound like they're trying to incorporate it just for the sake of like exploiting it as a talent. But that song is incredibly concise. It sort of opens and closes with that sort of contribution there. A+ song. And to Jim's point, the closer here, I really like Towards the Uncreated.
Very epic.
Yeah, it's got an epic, and it just, that sort of, the fading part of that song, it seems to, builds up, breaks down, and then comes back with a vengeance. It's a great way to close the record. It gives you that sort of epic close, and then instead of just sort of gently putting you to bed, like bludgeons you to sleep, right? It just, then
into unconsciousness.
Yeah. So, and there's, different atmospheric qualities to that track as well. So those three are the real standouts for me on this record. The part where I would be critical is it's not just the left-hand path, the yoga thing that happens in the middle of this record, like, but it's pairing it up against the Inner Wolf. Those side by side, it's a kind of a lull in the middle of this record for me. It sort of loses momentum there. So that part of the record, I wish you came out of this whatever South Asian acid trip hang out with the occult moment into something a little bit more up tempo. I feel like I'm waking up hungover, and they're sort of gently, bringing me back to life with Inner Wolf. That's my critical part of this record is I just think the tempo there, I would like a reorganization of the track listing to sort of spell those out differently. But it's just the whole yoga, when you start putting yoga in a thing like this, I just don't know if they're having a laugh at how ridiculous that concept is. I mean, I get the South Asian sort of element to it, but I kind of roll my eyes a little bit. So I don't know. It just feels like a fly in the ointment of this record, having that there. They go back to it lyrically, though. So it's like they want you to know that's who we are, what we believe in, what we practice. Anyway, that's my criticism of the record.
All right, Logan, favorite, least favorites.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no bad songs on here. To kind of highlight my favorites, though, I think the opening title track is a perfect representation of Weapon's sound on this album. Yeah, I mean, From the Devil's Tomb opens up clean sounding and with that Middle Eastern guitar before finally hitting into like the thrashy section that kind of allows it to take off. And it's just a great way to open the album. Jim already described Vortex 11724. That was honestly the first track that really stood out to me on my first spin. It's mid-paced and kind of straightforward with its anthemic chorus. Carve the flesh. Fucking awesome. Gets my blood pumping every time. And then there's a riff and tempo change halfway through that I think is one of the other things this band does perfectly. When they want to change up the tempo and the pacing of the track, they nail it every single time. And I'm going to come to the defense of Left Hand Path Yoga. I thought it was a great way to break up the album. And
me too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it when it came on. And as far as like an interlude track, I would listen to it by itself. I mean, and honestly, just the name is of course kind of stupid, but to me it was like a little bit of a nod of like, we actually don't take ourselves as seriously all the time. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But why would you call your song Left Hand Path Yoga if you did? I'm not sure. But it also makes me want to try yoga. And I have, and I don't like yoga.
So left hand path yoga, what does that mean? In a class in a class full of people farting instead of farting or shitting your pants?
You're going the other route. Upward facing dog, and you're pissing straight up into the.
Could be.
Yeah, but I would try if there was yoga with left hand path in the background. I would try that, and maybe I'd be a lot more of a peaceful guy because of it. So
there you go.
That's an if scenario. And then my favorite song on the album is The Inner Wolf, just because of the riff that is just front and center in that track. And then it brings you to like this middle section, which is like just thrash heaven. And I think that's why it works next to left hand path yoga, is because of this middle section, which is just full force, doesn't stop until it brings back that opening like riff and like keyboard. The keyboard section on here too, I think is perfect.
Yeah,
I just love how it builds. Yeah, it's just it feels like fire on all sides with this track. And then to bring up Sardonyx again, one of the best Tom G. Warrior that I've heard. Period. That was just, there's one like towards the end of the track, phenomenal. Chef's Kiss. So love the closer too. I as I said, I think every track is great. I could see this album being like maybe 5 to 10 minutes on the too long side. I said it goes by quick and doesn't feel like the runtime, but then, maybe trim it from 54 minutes to like 50 or 48. But really, that's a minor nitpick or complaint. So every song's great.
All right, Jim.
I love, Logan, that you have the exact opposite opinion that Kellen does for Left Hand Path Yoga and Inner Wolf. It's like the exact opposite.
I'm apparently the only one. You all can hang out go to your Fish concert and listen to Left Hand Path Yoga together. I'll sing by myself.
Bring my yoga mat.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, man, the opening title track is just absolutely amazing. If you don't, I think if you don't listen, if you haven't heard this and you don't listen to anything else on this record, you got to listen to that. I mean, that song, it just keeps awesome riffs coming, beginning to end. It's got the South Asian, melodic infusion in there. It's got the killer thrash riff. From the devils too. I mean, he actually says the title, and you want to yell it along with him. I mean, it's just pure metal, and it is just absolutely amazing. Furor Divinis also has a wonderful chorus, very catchy. We've already talked about Vortex. Yeah, man, it's you can totally sing along with it. That's the one I was talking about that has that pan guitar, an open chord on one side, tremolo picking on the other. I love that sort of back and forth, and it has also just the overall effect of the verse riffs and the chorus riffs are very kind of serpentine in their attack, and so another highlight on the album. I'm with you all the way, Logan, and on Sardonyx, man. Obviously Tom G. is absolutely killer. The riffs are absolutely stellar on that. You got what's cool about this one is that there's like a the South Asian music interlude in the middle that goes straight into like an incredibly badass metal riff, goes straight into there, and it's absolutely headbang inducing. So I love that song in the beginning to end. It's just amazing. Trishul, the one immediately following, is awesome too. On that song, there's like this evil choir, this and it's like and it really works with the riffing there. It's super memorable, really cool, very original sounding. The solo that precedes it is very tasteful. An absolute highlight for me. And then and Kellen, I'm with you on the closer, man. Towards the Uncreated, that song, man, what a closer. We've talked. One of our broken record things on this show as we hate like a weak closing to a metal album, this is not a weak closing. It absolutely does pummel you to death. I'll take Kellen's line there. And I'm a sucker if organs are put in an extreme metal song and done well, and there are organs in this song and they are done well. It's perfectly placed organs. I like, and they do this cool thing near the end of the song where they hit the old metal like doom, doom, tom hits like that, but the riff is like a tremolo riff. It's like when you mix that like 16th note picking over like a very simple like tom hit, it just sounds so cool and so different. Not a lot of bands like do stuff like that. So yeah, starts as a banger, closes as a banger. And yeah, I also agree with Logan. There's there's no song I don't like on this record. And as far as Left Hand Path Yoga, man, I love the guitar playing on it. The acoustic guitar that leads into it is very cool, very interesting. I think last week, one of the guys in the chat, when I mentioned that I picked this album, said that he had it as a ringtone back in the day. And then that's the one that has that crazy hard rock solo in it with the wah, which was like, what's happening? And so I love everything about Left Hand Path Yoga. I think it's amazing, and it's a cool like stop gap in the middle. It gives you like a little bit of a breather before
reset.
You reset before jumping right into the thrash attack of Interwolf. So yeah. No bad songs on this one for me, but if you don't listen to anything else, listen to the beginning and the end, and you're going to have a great time with this record.
Yeah, start to finish, I'm a big fan of this one. I think the first song does size up nicely, but little tasty treats reveal themselves as the album goes on. Track 2, Vested in Surplice and Violet Stole. I really like how it's interesting and entertaining how the band effortlessly alternates between raging riffs and a cleaner tone for that rage versus serenity dynamic. It kind of acts as when they do the clean spot part, it acts as a hook. And then they return to that hook later, playing it with tremolo instead of the picking. It's just cool. They get so much more mileage out of a cool piece of music by doing that. It gives also an aura of unpredictability to this and other songs on the album. Furor Divinis, my favorite song on the album. Blasting and endlessly catchy riffs. Mashrook's vocals capture the spirit and fury of the riffs perfectly. Very stately, chanted vocal lines in the chorus. They simply rule. The song flows in the music break with a very powerful and unique melody line that they build upon with well-paced alterations in the drum beats and a melodious solo before returning to the chorus and the hook again. Great song. Vortex, another fantastic song with a mountain of variety on display. That chanted line, carve thy flesh, carve thy flesh. That's the hook. Some mild morbid angelism sneak into some of the riff work on this one, but the influences Minor and Weapon quickly cascade back into their own independent style. Left-Handed Path Yoga, I think it's a well-considered and executed instrumental. Powerful progressions, soaring solo, and acoustic guitar break makes this one a colorful journey. Nice to find even more musical exploration right in the middle of the album. It's a good reset, like we mentioned. It's a perfect place for it. Interwolf, another favorite. The song contains that crazy blasting style on the snare that brings Weapon as close as they ever get to a war metal frame of reference, to me anyway. Let the riffs and overall sense of melody keep them far away from falling into that creative and destructive rut. Sardonyx is where we talked about a little bit more of a cultural musical influence. You've got the sitar and some type of a hand drum before the warring metal chaos beat erupts to make the song one of the more straightforward and aggressive tracks on the album. So yeah, a little more straightforward, but they do break it in the middle with even more of a playful spirit in the melody and a bit of those instruments return. Love the giant accent to bring the power back. Another well-composed song. Towards the Uncreated. Man, they go out with the most epic track on the album with a lofty riff and melody lines. The song feels very expansive and full of unpredictable twists. So, again, I really like the fact that from song to song to song, even if they go more of a standard song structure and playing style, it's still exciting. It's still fun, and they offer so much more rhythmic variety, guitar variety, vocal variety. Not like he doesn't change his vocal performance, but just the way he places those lyrical lines in the music as being a guitar player. He isn't just always. I mean, he's still kind of following the musical passages, but he's got he's got a lot of character in his vocal style. It doesn't bug me, and it works. He knows when to throw it off just enough to keep it interesting, or not sing at all and let the melody lines, a solo, all come up and keep the song interesting. It's just a really well-written album. So, Judgment, final thoughts. I think we're all kind of in agreement here. Logan.
Yeah, I mean, this is an album right up my alley. It pays no attention to genre lines and instead chooses to follow the altar of the riff and just creating like a unique atmosphere. And they go wherever the songwriting needs them to go, and in a way that creates well-crafted tracks and overall a well-crafted album. I mean, riff albums are a favorite kind of album for me, so this is definitely a no-brainer for it to click. And just the fact that the overall musicianship for every single instrument, I think, is top-notch, just adds to it. These guys are all great players, especially the guitar work on here. So the fact that this is such a diverse album that all kind of meshes together keeps it endlessly listenable and engaging each time that I've gone through it. And the fact that it possesses an occult-like atmosphere benefits it too. Like I've just been loving listening to this thing. As I said, the last week of October, it's just been great. Like Scythian, this is yet another unique band that, I guess because they decided to retire. I mean, the dude got himself a suit and tie office job, which good for him. But
yep,
people aren't talking about Weapon as much, so I'd be worried that this album and this band could get lost to the sands of time, for metal listeners. So I'm gonna add this one to my list of not on my watch. I will definitely be looking to add this one to the collection, and will continue to sing its praises for anyone who will listen. So I'm happy to give this one an 8.2 out of 10 for the Heavy Metallurgy. Good stuff. Good pick,
right
Jim.
Kellen.
So for me, I guess I don't know why this band really flew under the radar during this time period for me. I was curious, right? Because the first one comes out on Ajna. This is, I guess, they moved to Agonia for European distribution, with Ajna distributing here in the States, I guess, and then signed with Relapse for the third one. So I don't know if it's because they like Ajna is a label that I associate with this kind of sound a little bit more. And I guess Agonia a little bit, but by the time we get to Relapse in 2017, is that when the last record is?
2012.
2012, man.
Yeah.
It was just sort of a brief little run there, and I don't remember like in real time hearing a lot about them, right? Like I was paying attention to bands, Melakesh was brought up in the chat earlier. They're still going around at this time. Bands like, I still am a big Diocletian fan, and that is straight up, war metal. Like I was in this space, but I really had not grabbed onto Weapon, and I think they are one that sort of flew and consistently, probably because of their limited run or our record label jumping around there, don't get a lot of praise, but they kind of are a really interesting sounding band in the same way that I feel kind of Absu is another one that sort of, if you know, and maybe people don't in this time period, haven't heard of them. Cool band, really interesting sound by the time we get to the second record. I think this is where I would recommend everyone sort of start. And if you want a more primitive version of this, check out the first record. If you want them to see where they grow and build, check out their third. But Yeah, I just, for some reason, I wish they kind of had a little bit more sort of staying power and visibility during this time period, because they have a unique sound going on. Was happy to see Jim pull this and that he's a fan. So awesome.
I got to agree with Corey here. And in fact, Necros Christos is a good companion band to this band. They have a similar, really hooky, catchy way of writing songs. Slower, but still very stately performance.
Weapons standard or
but they
below
the stately vocals, the occult vibe, and they just feel like they're kind of in the same boat, you know.
Right.
Yeah, with the occultness, I definitely feel like that's what they share.
Yeah.
And also very limited releases, right? I think they just had 3 records as well during this time period.
Like that. All right, Jim.
So yeah, you know, obviously I picked it. You know, Weapon for me, man. I've loved them since I first heard them. I felt like they were doing something, and they were doing something very unique. You know, extremely talented musicians and songwriters, and that's the key thing. It's the songwriting. You know, it's to me, their songs are catchy, both vocally, the riffs are, and you know, guitar wise, the riffs are interesting. The arrangements are interesting. You know, there's always something to kind of like grab there. And what's cool about revisiting their albums is it's one of those kind of bands. I'm always finding something new. I'm like, oh wait, you know, I didn't notice that before. And I love records like that. And yeah, I was super sad when I found out the Weapon broke up, because I was, you know, really into them. So, you know, I, you know, will, you know, this is like Logan said, you know, I feel the same. I want to say from the mountaintops, check out Weapon. Yeah, they're not around anymore, but you know, their records are available. They're usually not too expensive, and you should check them out. You know, for me, for the uniqueness, for the great, just perfection combination of death, black, and thrash, for the occult vibe, for the album covers. I mean, you know, Weapon is really the whole package for me as a metal fan, and this album is a 9 for me, man. I love it that much. I love Weapon as a band that much. So highly recommend everybody check these guys out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything here. It's a 9 for me too. 9 out of 10. Great band. Dead too soon. Would have been cool to hear where they went. Their albums are, for this style, they're fun to listen to. It's just they work in the car, they work at home sitting in front of the stereo watching it. They're good sitting out on the deck drinking a beer. It's just you inject enough melody and hooks to an extreme form of metal. It's just the perfect combination. It just is. And Weapon, it's kind of a bummer that they've, you know, declined in popular, you know, people don't, it's just the way it goes with metal nowadays. If you're not putting out a record every year, people forget about you. They just do, unless you checked in at the age where people picked, it was like an influential age. Like for us, you know, me and Jim, it's a lot of thrash because we're thrash kids, and that stuff stands, or classic metal or early death metal, all that stuff you know, it trumps all the rest of it. So I don't know. They're a band that's you know, Jim's right. Go out and hunt down the stuff. It shouldn't be that expensive. Good stuff. It's worth listening to. It's fun. Has a evil, sinister vibe to it. Good shit. Well written. And that's it. Good pick, Jim. And before we let Logan, next week Kellen will not be with us. He'll be on a birthday sabbatical. Which, when is your birthday, Kellen? If you don't,
November 7th.
November 7th.
Same birthday as Steve DiGiorgio.
Wow.
Oh,
Nice. Logan's gonna pick, but it's long. We're long overdue for a viewer's choice. So what we're gonna do is, at the end of this video, go down in the comments section and put your choice for what you think we should cover. And I will probably put up a community post as well to remind people. And what I want you to do is populate the comments of this and that community post, and each of us boys here will go on by Sunday and pick one title each, upon which I will make a poll. There'll be a 4 title poll, and then all of you viewers will decide which album we listen to. So we will announce the winner of this event on Wednesday. But until then, Noah. I've been hung out with Noah all weekend. Logan.
Noah is a new one for me. I appreciate that.
Nola.
Nola. Yeah, that's what you're trying to say.
What's our pick for next week?
All right. Well, when I started doing this thing, there was a couple of genres in my mind that I've been wanting to bring to metallurgy. Already did sludge, so check that off. And now, I'm sorry, guys, we're moving on to metalcore.
Oh, fuck me.
I know you guys are screwed. Callum,
I think I have a birthday next week.
Why are you leaving, Callum?
Yeah, I think there's
This might not be that bad. Okay?
My sickness is coming back.
Marty died for a week. And
I don't feel good.
I don't know if you guys know this band. We're Integrity, Those Who Fear Tomorrow. So this is a metalcore one, but this is one I'm trying to bridge.
No, Integrity I can get behind, man.
They're fine.
Dwid's awesome, man.
They were holding their breath. With like, oh God, where's this gonna go?
Integrity we can do. Dude, I love his cover of Bark at the Moon, man. Have you heard that?
I haven't. Sounds awesome.
Oh my God, it is amazing, dude. Check it out, dude. It's so great.
On the list. So Those Who Fear Tomorrow, and honestly, I think this is a good election week album as well. So
there it is. Okay. Yeah, everybody, thanks for joining us. Good time as always. Great chat. Good to see some new faces. And guess what? I don't ask for much around here, but we have less than 100 to go until we hit 6,000 subscribers. So do this old fat man a favor. Let's by December hit 6,000. That'd be cool. If you're a looky-loo and you don't subscribe. It helps us out. It'll be good. I'm tired of it. We've been treading water here the last couple of weeks. It's been a slow roll. So subscribe if you're not, and it helps out the channel. And please go subscribe to all these fine gentlemen as well. Killing for Company, Metal and Beer Snob, and Jim doesn't have a YouTube channel. Go check out Eihwaz Recordings. Go buy some tapes. It'll make him happy.
Yes. Anybody
have anything before we jump?
I actually do have a couple things. So Rick over at the Dreadful Minutes, everyone's favorite YouTuber, yeah, he's got a Halloween themed video that is premiering tomorrow that I recorded live with him like a week or so ago. So tune in for that for all of your All Hallows Eve Halloween, nonsense. I think it starts at 9 Eastern. And then he's also doing a Day of the Dead stream for the Sattersley crew on Saturday. And then one more plug for Van Halen. Marty, come get your schooling.
I may have heard that whole album too.
From a couple millennials who know nothing what we're talking about on Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, ranking the Van Halen discography up through Unlawful Carnal Knowledge.
I do have one thing, show notes. Friday, I'll be back, and we'll have Melanie Loves Death Metal and Simon from Explosive Action on, and we will be discussing our favorite album for each year between 1990 and 1999. So a little bit different. We've done it once before. It was fun. Should be hard to pick, but it'll be fun. Come join us. King Snake Jake, I'm getting better. It's still a bit of a cough. I've been sick all month. It's annoying. Anyway, cheers, everybody. Y'all rule. We will see you next week here, Friday, for those of you that want to stick around. Cheers.